Living with your dog, living with your dog, living with your dog with Charlotte.
Hi, welcome to Living with Your Dog. I'm Charlotte Pelt, certified dog behavior consultant. I'm a huge fan of Zazie Dodd, Dr. Zazie Dodd. That's a PhD type doctor. She's always got a lot of good things to share with us. And today it's, do people treat little dogs differently than big dogs?
Hmm.
And links between behavior and training may explain small dog syndrome. And key points, she said, is the small dog syndrome, which is in quotes, refers to little dogs when they bark, jump up, plunge, growl, hide, or are excitable. Signs of aggression, anxiety, and fear are more common in small dogs. And people treat small dogs differently. Small dogs get less exercise, training, and enrichment. So she says the source for this is the Grish Petrosilian Texels. And when I take my little dog Pepper for a walk, it's more like a meander. He is 12 years old and is on pain meds for arthritis. I let him choose where to walk, which means following his nose and making sure he gets to sniff all the smells in our part of the street. When another dog has literally just walked by, he will happily follow their scent for half a block before returning to retrace his steps. Sometimes we go up and down and back and over again the same 30 meters while he checks to make sure he didn't miss anything. These sniffaries, as I call them, are a great way to provide enrichment for a little dog. But do little dogs get their fair share of enrichment and training? If not, could that explain, in quotes, small dog syndrome? And what is small dog syndrome? It's a name given to small dogs who behave in ways that are often seen as misbehavior: growling, barking, jumping up, being excitable, lunging and snapping at people or bigger dogs. These behaviors may be signs that the dog is uncomfortable in that situation, such as when the dog is growling or hiding to try to increase distance, or they could simply be signs that the dog has not been trained not to jump up. Small dogs are very popular. Common breeds include the toy and miniature poodle, dachshund, chihuahua, Yorkshire Terrier, and miniature schnauzer. Of course, not all small dogs engage in these behaviors much. Research suggests that people treat little dogs differently in a number of ways. So, could it be that small dog syndrome is due, at least in part, to their guardian's behavior? One issue is that small dogs are often not given choices. Because of their diminutive size, people pick them up and move them around instead of calling them over. Big dogs are just too big and heavy for that. People also often ignore or even laugh at growls and snaps from small dogs because they know they're not likely to do much damage if provoked. Another issue is that people do less with little dogs. One study published in Applied Animal Behavior Science found that small dogs were indeed more likely to be aggressive, anxious, and fearful than big dogs, but people were less likely to take their small dogs for a walk, train them, and play with them. They were also more likely to be inconsistent in how they treated their dog compared to people with big dogs. This research also showed that small dogs, even more so than big dogs, are more likely to be aggressive or excitable if aversive methods like leash jerks or yelling are used in training. It's important to use reward-based methods to train all dogs. And for more, see the AVSAB position statement on humane dog training. That's the American Veterinary Society behaviors. There are also differences in house training. Only 67% of small dogs are fully house trained, compared to 95% of large dogs, according to research published in the Journal of Veterinary Behavior. There are several reasons why this could be the case, including small dogs have a smaller bladder, being more likely to live in apartment buildings where it takes longer to get outside, and being less likely to be trained. Although this study could not give a definitive cause, the results show that when small dogs are taken to training classes, they are more likely to be house trained as well. The training they get, the more likely they are to be house trained. So the results of these studies suggest that many people with small dogs should be doing more for them, and that includes taking small breed puppies to puppy class to help socialize them, train small breeds with positive reinforcement, Play with your little dog and have fun with them. Make sure they have a good selection of toys. Use food puzzle toys to feed some of your little dog's meals. Give your little dog chances to use their nose, whether via safaris, scent games, or even nose work classes. Take your small dog for walks. Some breeds of small dogs, including the Yorkshire Terrier, Pomeranian, Chihuahua, Miniature Pinscher, Westie, and Dachshund, can be surprisingly athletic. If your dog is flat-faced, heaven forbid you're going to have a brachycephalic, make sure they don't get overheated or overexert themselves. Learn more about why health issues in brachycephalic dogs are often missed. Consider taking your small dog to classes like agility or rally if you think they and you would enjoy it. Give your small dog choices when possible. For example, do a consent test when petting them. Don't ignore if your small dog growls or hides. Work out what is making them unhappy and see what you can do to help them. Of course, the way we care for and train our pets is only part of the story. Genetics are important too, and it's quite possible that there are genetic differences between little dogs and big dogs. There are genetic differences in that small dogs require more calories per ounce than big dogs. So that tells you something. Their metabolism is different. And if that's different, there must be other things that are different as well, or there should be, could be. But it does seem that we treat little dogs differently. Most small dogs would benefit from more walks, training, enrichment, including safaris and choices. And that's why I keep making sure Pepper is enjoying his walks, however short they are. And I think that there is a difference between the physiology, the inherited traits of small dogs versus large dogs. I don't think there's any question about that. That's for sure. You know, as I say, their metabolism is different. If that's different, why not other things as well, right?
For sure. You know, and this again is a topic that we don't often think about, but is super important. I mean, when you first started, you started with the question, do people treat little dogs differently than big dogs? I thought, well, yeah, probably, sure, yeah. But then when we go into it a little bit, yeah, you're right. They don't often receive, and why don't they receive more training and stuff like that than the bigger dogs? And I was thinking, often people will use the small dog as entertainment is what I'm thinking. We have them for as a gesture for ourselves, a clown for ourselves, but the bigger dogs we live with and work with. What do you think?
Well, yeah, and of course there is the no doubt issue that a small dog poop or urine on the inside the house is no big deal. It is a big deal for a big dog. Yeah. So we're definitely going to give more attention to seeing to it that our big dogs are properly house trained and not worry so much about little dogs. And very often, of course, if a person lives in a high rise, trying to get a little dog down the elevator and all the way out and so on is, very often they're just trained to go into the bathtub or some, the tile floor in the shower, which doesn't work as well for a large dog. And I've even read where they're trained to use like a kitty litter tray, which of course for a tiny dog, that's not a problem. Right. That's very serviceable. It just doesn't work for big dogs. And again, the training aspect, while the small dogs deserve to be trained, people can just pick them up and remove them from the scene. So they don't have to worry about it. And unfortunately, it does seem that they're yappier and they're pestier and a lot of other things because they're not being trained. It's not because that they're small dogs and therefore that's the way they behave. They're just not being trained. It's one thing for a small dog to paw you, and it's another thing for a giant Schnauzer, a German Shepherd, a Great Dane to paw you with one of those nails. It can rip a lot of skin off. Right. So we just accept things that we really should address because they're still dogs, smaller otherwise.
Very true. Yeah, I'm thinking it's, because they're cute. When a little dog misbehaves or, barks too much or claws or whatever, it's cute. But when a big dog does it, we freak out. Oh, stop barking, stop barking. But when a little dog does it, you're like, oh my God, it's so cute.
Yeah, exactly. And that's, we're not treating them like dogs. We're treating them like
Hmm.
living, breathing pets, the stuffed dogs that are living and breathing, but they're not really dogs.
Well, that breed is categorized as toys.
Mhm.
So, I mean, this right off the bat, they're not dogs. We call them toys.
Yeah, right.
And
It's
like I said,
true.
they're here for our toys are here for our entertainment.
Yeah, yeah. It's um, it's a misservice.
Yeah. Wow. Wow. That's
Okay.
something to keep
How
in mind.
about senior dogs? Is your senior dog declining? Pay attention to these common symptoms of decline. They sleep more than usual. Causes include pain, cognitive dysfunction, loss of vision, or loss of hearing. And it can be minimal. It's not that they're totally deaf or they're totally blind, but it does affect how they behave and interact in the world. Okay, a urinary or bowel accidents in the house, loss of house training. Causes include pain, cognitive dysfunction, infection, metabolic disorders, or neurological dysfunction. Urine or stool leakage causes include endocrine dysfunction, metabolic disorders, infection, or neurologic dysfunction. And decreased mobility causes include pain, joint disease, or muscle weakness. Inability to respond to simple commands, and I don't like the use of commands, I prefer to use cues. Causes include decreased vision or hearing, cognitive dysfunction, or brain disease. Increased anxiety, panting, or shaking, and causes include metabolic disorders and pain, decreased vision or hearing, cognitive dysfunction, or brain disease. Increased whining, moaning, or shaking causes include metabolic disorders, pain, cognitive dysfunction, brain disease. I've never heard that expression, brain disease,
Brain
before,
disease.
and I'm not sure precisely what it does mean.
Hmm.
Decreased interest in surrounding causes include decreased vision and hearing, cognitive dysfunction, lack of mental stimulation, or pain. Getting lost or stuck in corners causes include decreased vision and hearing, cognitive dysfunction, brain disease, or metabolic disorders. And decreased purposeful activity causes include decreased vision and hearing, cognitive dysfunction, or pain. So there are things that we need to think about as our dogs age, and some of those things we can address, such as pain. I think it's very reasonable that older dogs are going to be feeling some joint discomfort, and that should be addressed. They shouldn't be living in pain.
Right.
Oh, I don't want to give them those their steroids. Well, they're anti-inflammatory, they're non-steroid anti-inflammatories, and they deserve to be free of pain. Yes, I think, and I encounter that occasionally even now, and it surprises me when people say, well, she no longer jumps up the couch to be next to me when I'm watching the TV. Well, why not?
Hmm.
It hurts. And you're doing nothing about that? It's not reasonable to avoid giving non-steroid anti-inflammatories to start with. And as dogs get older, whatever it takes to make their lives comfortable and pleasant is the way to go. When you've got a 12 to 13, 14-year-old dog, you're going to worry about something that's going to hurt their longevity. I mean, give me a break.
Right.
They deserve to have comfort. We're not worried about the long-term effects of the drugs at that point. We should be concerned about how comfortable they are in the legs and the body that they're moving around in. And I feel very strongly about that. When they're way up in years, we're not going to worry about liver dysfunction, and we shouldn't. It's time to worry about how comfortable they are in the shoes they're wearing. So
I
there we
like
go.
that. They deserve to be free of pain.
Really, that's true. And we shouldn't just, oh, he's old, therefore he's in pain. Well, I'm old. I'm in pain. I take something for it.
Yeah, I get that. There are some dog owners who are against, pharmaceuticals and stuff like that. I totally understand that. But yes, they should be free of pain. And like you said, the drugs aren't, we don't need to worry about long-term effects.
Exactly.
That makes so
Yeah.
much sense. But and there are some things that older dogs that we won't be able to not cure, that we wouldn't be able to relieve them of, such as the cognitive decline and hearing loss and sight loss. There's not
Right.
much we can do for those things, correct?
Right. But it's certainly worth taking the dog to the veterinarian and having them examined, because it may be something we can deal with. There can be a tumor that could be removed. Maybe it can't be removed, but it may be able to be removed and restore better or complete function to the disabled part. And yeah, and we are not always able to palpate accurately the way a veterinarian can. So if we don't see a bulge, we may think there isn't one there, where in fact there is something.
And that's why Charlotte suggests taking your older dog to the vet twice a year.
Exactly. Exactly. Those are preventative measures,
Right.
so that something can be done for the dog before it is untreatable.
And continues to cause pain.
Right. And and omega-3s are, I think, a must give. It does have pain relieving benefits. It has immune system benefits, and your dog should be getting omega-3s. And you can check with your veterinarian about what and how much, but it's the best supplement possible.
And there are other things that we can provide our dogs for pain and whatnot in instead of pharmaceuticals, instead of drugs. And there's natural things, like you said, the omega-3s.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Omega-3s, I think, are a must do. Right.
And that's basically what we talk about a lot on this show, is things that we can provide our dog so that they live a better life and not necessarily have a lot of these issues when they get older. So if we are feeding our dog the species appropriate diet, then
There you go.
then a lot of these issues, I I would say they are less likely to appear in the dog's older age.
Right. Or they will appear much older in the dog than when you're giving kibble stuff.
Hmm.
That you know
The
that
cancer causing
non
food.
yeah. When they're getting species specific nutrition, they are likely to have fewer issues, or the issues set in much later in life.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a real benefit. Again, nutrition, nutrition, nutrition. Species specific food, which kibble is not.
And just one example that we like to give often is dental health. If you give your dog species appropriate food, especially raw bones to chew on, they're not going to necessarily, they'll have a less likely of chance of having dental disease. Is that correct?
Yes, but they should be raw meaty bones.
Raw meaty bones.
People will give those marrow bones, which are not meaty bones. And those are weight bearing bones that can cause dental damage. They can crack teeth. If you've got an aggressive chewer, they can crack teeth on those bones. Those are not raw meaty bones. So for small dogs, and while it used to be that chicken wings were a bargain, they're now pricey. There's no question about it. But if you've got a small dog, you can certainly afford to buy chicken wings, and you can divide them up into the 3 pieces, so that there's one part that's very meaty, and that's no longer a raw meaty bone to me. That's just a lot of meat with a bone in it. So I recommend cutting the meat off right close to the bone. The meat goes into dinner bowl. That's their meat ration for the day. And so small dogs can have that. I'm a huge fan of chicken feet. I give them frozen. They're loaded with glucosamine, which is another great supplement, and they're very good for their teeth, and they're healthy. My 14-year-old Bouvier never had his teeth cleaned, never, and he had no periodontal disease whatsoever. And that was because from the time I got him at 4 months of age, and he did have some changes in his teeth at that point, right? he had changes already at 4 months of age. And I can remember taking him to the vet for a wellness exam, not wanting to take on serious and expensive health problems at that point in my life. I wanted to have a wellness exam. And the vet said, well, we really should clean those teeth. And I said, let me see what happens when I get them on raw beady bones. Never had to have them professionally cleaned.
Awesome.
The raw bones did it. Now, we're talking in terms of not the marrow bones because they're not raw meaty bones. They're harder than the dog's teeth. But irregularly shaped bones, like I get pork shoulder bones when I can get them. And I did get some today. Angie will, she knows they're in the bag over there. But they're frozen, and I won't give her one of those. I'll give her chicken feet frozen, but I won't give her the shoulder bone frozen. I'm afraid it would hurt her teeth. So she'll get that later, and it has a lot of irregular shape. So it really does a flossing job, you know, and it's they weigh close to a pound each. It's a big thing, and she'll go through one in about 15 minutes.
Wow.
And she's only, like a 33-pound dog. She really puts her heart in it. I mean, there's no question about it. And I give it to her on her bed, but I put a bath towel on the bed rather than wanting to take the bed cover off and have to wash it. It's easier to throw the bath towel in. She sees me move that bath towel, and she is jumping for joy. It's really funny.
Now, is Angie considered a senior dog?
Yes, she's 12, so she's a senior. Yeah. I think that even though she's small, she's a standard size dog. She's small for the standard Schnauzer breed by probably an inch and a couple of pounds. But yeah, she's considered in the standard size of dogs, and she is a standard Schnauzer. And years ago, I had a giant Schnauzer, and Bouviers were my breed of choice. But I figured at my age, it wasn't smart to have a dog that I couldn't pick up and carry if I needed to do that. And while I pump iron at the gym, it's another thing to pick up 80 pounds of dog and carry it around.
I love that, Charlotte, pumping iron at the gym.
There you go.
Okay, so if you could tell us, what are some of the things that you do for your senior dog, specifically because Angie is a senior?
Well, I don't do much different. I have been feeding her a species-specific diet since I got her at 4 years of age, and I haven't changed that. Now, she doesn't eat as much because she's just not as active, and I no longer feel my balance isn't as good as it could be since I had the hip replacement.
Right.
And so she doesn't get out for walks. She gets out on a long line, and she's not interested any longer, really. I mean, she'd love to go for a walk, I'm sure, but it's not she needed it as she did for a young dog. So I just go out the door. She's kind of like on a 20-foot line, and she marches around and does a sniff thing and patrols, and then she heads back to the door. And one day she did get out. I didn't realize that the door hadn't snapped shut, and I really panicked because this is a very quiet section, but there's still cars that go by. And she took off like a shot, and I was sure I was going to hear screaming and hollering and I saw a big truck go down the road. This is an enclosed section where the house is, but there's a roadway that leads up here, and of course that's where she headed. Love her to death. And she only went a short distance, and within like 90 seconds, she was back. So I was very thankful that worked out.
She went out, lost interest, and was like, okay, let's go home.
Right, exactly. And I was worried, but she came running back, wanted in the house. So that was lucky.
That's one thing that you do for your senior dog, then, is you're not as active. You're not having her be as active as she once was.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So I'm sure that she would enjoy it if I took her out for a walk. I don't think there's any question about that. I just don't feel as steady on my feet as I once did. At 88, I mean, that's not too unreasonable consideration. And I don't want to be out walking on irregular terrain with a dog that's leaping and jumping around and having a ball. So,
Right.
you know, that's her sacrifice to be with me.
Both of you have declined in your activities.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. It is what it is. No question.
Living with your dog, living with your dog, living with your dog with Charlotte.
Okay. How about diet rotation? I think this was from Susan Fixon. Let me see if that's the case.
Diet rotation.
I forgot to write it down, but I think it's Susan Fixon.
Okay.
No, I know it wasn't. It wasn't her.
Wasn't Susan
It
Fixon.
was the dog advisor.
It was what's his name? Dog food advisor.
You'll think about it. Okay. Diet rotation helps lower risk. It can be a safer way to feed your dog, and that's because any dog food can contain hidden flaws and defects. Too much of one nutrient, too little of another, or the food may contain hidden toxins or industrial contaminants. Those are reasons why I won't feed commercial feed. Imperfections not yet discovered by the manufacturer or the FDA is another possibility, maybe not a probability, but a possibility. And you'd never even know it. What's worse, the effect of consuming any defective food tends to be magnified whenever you feed the same food continuously, day after day, for a lifetime. And here are some of the most common questions we get about diet rotation for dogs. What is it? Unlike a conventional feeding plan where the same food is served at each meal, diet rotation involves intentionally switching your dog's food on a planned schedule. Why should I consider diet rotation for my dog? Since there's no such thing as a perfect dog food, it's reasonable to assume every product you buy is deficient or excessive in some crucial way. By periodically switching dog foods, the unhealthy consequences of serving the same imperfect products can be minimized. Is changing your dog's diet dangerous? Diet rotation is not for every dog. That's because some animals can't tolerate diet changes as easily as others. While others are on special prescription, so-called, which we no longer believe is true, they put it in quotes, on special prescription diets, it should not be switched without the advice of your dog's vet. In any case, we've never been able to find a single scientific study proving diet rotation to be unhealthy or detrimental to a dog. Does diet rotation mean mixing two dog foods and serving them at the same meal? No, that's not diet rotation. No benefits of diet rotation. The benefits are optimized only when cycling between different products on a periodic basis. How often should dog foods be switched? There's no rotation feeding plan that works better than the others. It all depends on your own personal feeding preferences. Some dog parents switch food monthly, others more frequently. Most prefer to empty one bag of kibble before beginning the next. Incidentally, you do not buy a 50-pound bag of kibble for your 3-pound Chihuahua. You don't do that. I don't care if it's a bargain or not. It isn't a bargain in the long haul because there's no food, commercial, I don't care how well it's packaged, that is going to stay safe for very long. I think you should limit the amount to 2 weeks. More expensive? In the long haul, no. Okay. And of course, I for one wouldn't feed kibble no matter what. And the reasons for that start with it's a minimum of 40% carbohydrates. Dogs have a 0 carbohydrate requirement. Therefore, they're missing out of 40% of something they do need. That's just plain logical, folks. Okay, is there a downside to diet rotation? There are 2 potential problems with diet rotation: digestive upset, 1, and 2, maintaining product freshness. Since some dogs have sensitive stomachs, the potential for GI upset can be an issue for certain pets. And because alternating between 2 or more kibbles can make each bag take longer to use up. It can be difficult to maintain the freshness of each product. And once you open that bag, it's not going to stay fresh for very long.
Yeah, there's no
So,
keeping that stuff fresh at all.
no, no. But you should always, if you're going to feed that stuff, you should always keep it in its original packaging in case something goes wrong, and you can notify your vet and you can notify the authorities and you can give them the important information about that lot size, the brand name, all of the information that would be gone with the bag if you tossed it. Now, if you feel that you want to put it into a storage bin, put the bag in the bin. Just don't dump the food into the bin and toss the bag.
Well, yeah, and plus that bag is designed in a way to help keep that stuff,
Yes,
quote unquote, fresh.
yes, it is. They have a lining that is supposed to help with it. That the inside of your dog food container bucket, whatever, isn't going to do.
Keyword helps.
How can I switch to a new food without getting my dog sick? And then there's a video here, and Dr. Gary Richter shares a simple feeding tip that can lower your dog's risk of getting sick when you switch to a new food. Day 1, 20%, and by the time at day 9, you're at 100%. So that reduces the chance of a GI upset. And when you're switching again, you can switch within the same product company, but switch the flavor, so to speak, of the dogs. And incidentally, when it comes to flavor, whatever the word flavor says, salmon flavor, there's no salmon in there. All right. That's just a chemical name. So it's important to understand that. And if you insist on continuing with kibble, keep in mind that just by adding some of your leftover steamed vegetables, occasionally a bit of real meat, raw meaty bones, makes a big difference in the long haul. It's important to do that.
So
And
I'm sorry. This was the dog food advisor. That was the name we were looking for. Was Mike Sagman.
there you go. Thank you very much.
And this article is basically talking about diet rotation in terms of dry dog feed. Now,
or canned. If I mean, if you know, whatever you're feeding, if it's canned or if it's dry, for sure.
Switch it up at least every 2 weeks. My question is that the same for a species appropriate diet? If we're feeding a raw food diet to our dogs, should we be switching it up just as
well,
as much?
From what the way I see it, they're switched all the time. I mean, I'm buying meat on special. I'm not buying the same meat all the time. I'm getting a variety. What is a given every day is 2 frozen chicken feet after dinner. That she gets, that's for sure. But otherwise, it's whatever the specials are. So she gets the rotation. In general, I try to get what my local supermarket sells is in the produce department. They sell a bag of vegetables that has broccoli, cauliflower, and carrots in it. And I take out for her about a cupful and I lightly steam it for 3 minutes in the microwave. And she gets a portion of that in her dinner. So she gets basically the same 3 vegetables, but I also give her sauerkraut. And I thought when I read about sauerkraut, fermented vegetables being a great idea, I thought, I wonder if she's going to eat that. She loves it.
Oh, wow.
She digs into that. I watched her for sure carefully last night because I put her meat in and I put the sauerkraut in and I put the vegetables in and she went for the sauerkraut first.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So, but fermented vegetables are definitely valuable addition. And as I said, I was surprised that she just dug into it. Of course, she's been exposed to variety, so it wasn't shocking for her, but it was still that she did that first rather than finishing up everything and saying, I wonder what I'm supposed to do with this.
That's a really good point to make. She's been exposed to a bunch of different stuff, so making the switch isn't doesn't necessarily cause her fear or anxiety,
None whatsoever.
which
No.
it can in a lot of dogs, because you stick something new in their bowl and they're gonna look at you like, what the heck are you doing?
Yeah, what is this?
Yeah.
Right, is this? I can
Okay.
remember, I can remember when I first got into raw back in the 90s,
Mhm.
and I had a giant schnauzer and I had a Bouvier. And the giant schnauzer picked up the raw meaty bone and went trotting off like, you finally got it right. You're a little slow, Mom, but I got it right. And the Bouvier looked at it and looked at me like, so what am I supposed to do with that? And I don't remember. I think it was a chicken wing, but whatever it was, I had to smash it up. I put it in a plastic bag and I smashed it into smithereens and added those bunched up stuff to the kibble. And then I could slowly wean him over to the fact that he would just eat it. And when I switched to beef, I had to do the same thing, or pork. Actually, I almost never feed beef, but pork and chicken for sure. And each one, I had to smash it up and introduce it in small bits. And then finally, we were on our road. So it worked.
So real quick, why don't you feed beef to your dog?
For some reason, feedlot beef gets to me more than pork, feedlot pork. I don't know why, but I just made a decision that there was one of those I wasn't going to feed.
Oh, so it's just availability?
No, it's the feedlot concept
Oh,
of
I got
raised
you.
animals. It just bothers me.
Hmm.
And I can't afford to buy locally raised meat.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
It's I can't afford it for myself, but I just don't eat very much meat anymore at all. And I insist on giving her, which is species specific. But I just draw the line at beef.
Okay.
So she gets chicken, turkey, and pork.
All right. And even with the species appropriate diet, we still want to rotate the foods that you are giving your dog. The thing is though, is I can see people who have made the switch to species appropriate, and they find a product, because there are a lot of products nowadays that are raw food. It's not the dry kibble, it's actual raw food for dogs. But I can see a dog owner getting into the habit, as they would with kibble, of just buying one brand of raw food, packaged food, to give their dog, and then just get into the habit of just doing that rather than rotating it around like they should be.
Well, it's probably a step in the right direction,
For sure.
so long as the company is providing variety and they're not putting all of it, salmon and meat and pork and chicken all in the same package.
Right.
That's not helping anything. So if they're packaging up and they've got chicken and they've got turkey and they've got fish of some sort or another, and you're buying it differently. Now, if you've got a really small dog, you're going to say, but I can't afford to do it that way. Well, what you do is you buy a package of the fish and you buy a package of the pork and you buy a package of the chicken and you defrost it. And yes, it's a bother. There's no question about it. And then you repackage it in smaller portions so that you have like a 4-day supply of each of those things in little sandwich bags in the freezer, and you pull out something and rotate them. So yes, the big thing about doing this is it takes more time. And there are people that are simply going to say, I don't have time. Well,
Right. Right.
you have time. It's how you plan your time. So I don't consider that a really good excuse. And
Certainly not having it.
that's right. It's just get real, folks. Get real. Okay, Dr. Zazie Todd, reasons to be positive about being positive in dog training, and why debunking outdated ideas can backfire, the importance of spreading quality information, and the best ways to counteract misleading duds by Dr. Zazie Todd. Many dog trainers who rely on using reward-based methods feel passionately about the importance of using humane methods that don't cause dogs to experience fear or pain. Thus, they feel it strongly when people use or share articles about methods that involve shock collars, dominance, pack theory, or any form of positive punishment because they know aversive methods have risks for dog. And incidentally, when we're talking in terms of behavior, positive punishment and negative punishment, these are just indications of adding something or distracting something. It's arithmetic. It's not that positive punishment is going to be good. It means that it's being added to something that you're doing. So it's just arithmetic. What are the best ways to counteract this kind of misleading information? This is a question that preoccupies me and many of you, I know, because it is such an important one for animal welfare. I've written before about the many factors that influence people's choice of dog training, Todd 2018. And in this post, I want to look at some of those factors in more detail. The importance of the social norms in dog training. A social psychological approach called the theory of planned behavior tells us that one of the factors that influences people's behavior is their perception of social norms. That is, the way we think society in general believes how people should behave. When it comes to dog training, many of us have the belief that dogs should be treated with kindness, that our pets are treasured creatures who deserve to have their choices in life and to be trained in ways that will provide joy and enrichment. At least that's how regular readers of this blog feel. That's one of the reasons I feel privileged to have such amazing readers. Thank you. But when we look at wider society, we can see that some people have quite different perceptions of special norms around dog training. When we see TV programs demonstrating the use of shock collars, alpha rolls, bookstores selling dog training books that promote punishment-based approaches, and random internet people or even celebrities or veterinarians recommending trainers who use aversive methods, we can see a very different kind of social norm being created. One way to counteract this is simply to spread and keep on spreading good quality information about the best ways to train dogs effectively and with kindness. But the way social media is designed can sometimes feel like it's working against us. Algorithms that promote posts that receive a lot of comments can make controversial posts spread like wildfire, which means that sometimes arguing against things on Facebook might backfire. At the same time, it's important for there to be voices of reason and humanity, so the choice to engage or not is a personal one every time. Social psychologists know that even one different voice in a sea of similar opinions can make a difference. Lewandowski et al. In 2017 writes, people should be encouraged to make their voices heard, not just to directly persuade, but also to influence people's perceptions of norms and the prevalence of opinions so that false consensus effects do not arise. Even a few dissenting voices can shift the perceived social norm, i.e. the perceived range of acceptable views, thus legitimizing opposition and encouraging evidence-based discourse, end of quote. We can put those social media algorithms to good use when we see material we like, positively reinforce the author by leaving a nice comment and then again by sharing the post. And we're telling those algorithms that this is the kind of content we want to see more of. Stick to positive messages that will reinforce social norms, that it's important to treat dogs with kindness. And I think that's all she had to say. No, there's more. Countering misinformation about dog training. Sadly, the world is full of erroneous information about dogs and many other topics too, of course. The problem is that countering misinformation is a tricky thing to do. We often hear these days that countering arguments with facts won't change people's minds. Actually, it's kind of complicated and something we need more research on if any communication scholars would like to take on the dog training world. There's plenty of material here. But one really important thing to remember is that repeating misinformation, even in order to correct it, can have a different effect to the one intended, in part because it causes that misinformation to feel more familiar and gives it the illusion of truth. This is called the illusory truth effect. Repeating lies make them seem more true. And I think that's an interesting concept.
Yeah.
This is one reason debunking false information can backfire. If you must repeat the misinformation, at least preface it with a warning. E.g., some people still believe in the outdated notion that, end quote, and then give some correct information to take its place. E.d., your dog is growling because she is afraid. Mention the body language signals that demonstrate this. Tell them what to do to make things better. And Schwartz et al. Wrote, overall, behavioral research shows that often the best strategy in the fight against misinformation is to paint a vivid and easily understood summation of the truthful message one wishes to impart instead of drawing further attention to false information, end quote. Tug is another dog training topic where there's been a lot of misinformation, but it's a great game to play with your dog and a good idea to let them win. Setting the agenda and sticking to it, another reason not to repeat information becomes obvious when we think about how dog trainers talk about punishment. One of the problems with using punishment to train dogs is that it only teaches a dog what not to do. And again, this is something we strive. It doesn't teach them what to do instead. And that's our job, not what not to do, what to do. And similarly, if we keep repeating misinformation in order to correct it, we're not spending that time teaching people what they should know instead. Don't let aversive trainers set the agenda. We want to keep the conversation on our terms, and that means talking about the benefits of reward-based training and the technicalities of how to do it, because it is complicated and people often need coaching to do a great job of it. Now, maybe you're thinking that I linked to posts on dominance and punishment and so at the top of the article. Yes, I'll put my hands up. I have written on those topics, although not necessarily in the way you'd expect. In my defense, I spend most of my time writing about evidence-based ways to care for our pets. Luckily for me, this is where my interests lie. If someone really wants to get into an argument, send them to the science to find out for themselves. And you'll find scientific articles on dog training at my website, she says. This is just eye candy, but photos help people stay engaged with posts. And being wrong can sometimes be an identity threat. Sometimes people are very interested in ideas that are wrong that they don't know are wrong. Imagine someone has been told by a dog trainer that in order to be a good dog trainer, they must follow some kind of outdated method of dog training. Because the person loves their dog and because they trust their dog trainer, their own beliefs about being a good dog trainer might be tied into using methods the trainer recommended. In this case, when we tell someone that the idea is wrong, it's possible they will perceive it as a threat to their own beliefs about being a good dog trainer. In other words, a threat to their identity. Yep. And this is a big issue and has to be recognized. This can sometimes make them hang on to that idea even harder. So again, telling them the idea is wrong may have the opposite effect to the one intended. So instead of addressing what's wrong, try to address, let's try this. Let's see if it doesn't work a little better. Worth giving it a try, right? Okay. So it's better to put cognitive effect into correct ideas, not misinformation. If the person then comes up with reasons why they think their idea is right, after all, psychology tells us the view will likely become even more entrenched. When people think about reasons for the misinformation, it can make it harder for them to change their minds. People who generate arguments supporting misinformation struggle to later question and change their initial studies and beliefs. Yeah, because then what happens is then you have to admit you were wrong. And people don't want to do that.
No.
Don't want to do that. If people are going to put cognitive effect into understanding or something, it's best to encourage them to put that effect into thinking about the correct ideas rather than the wrong ones. So instead of calling somebody wrong, just try to address something right that they can try. Okay. So I think that this idea will resonate with dog trainers because we're used to telling people how important it is for the behaviors we want to be rehearsed many times and to remove the opportunities for the wrong behavior to be rehearsed. So there's an analogy that makes sense here. Okay, we want to put cognitive effect into the correct areas, not into misinformation. Research also shows that it's important to support people and build their confidence in using positive reinforcement if they are to use it in the future. Education makes a difference. Helping people to understand why something is the case can help to counteract misinformation. For dog lovers, this includes helping people to evaluate the credentials of dog trainers so they can choose a good trainer. It means talking about the benefits of reward-based training methods and how we know that they are humane and effective. It means talking about cooperative veterinary care, low stress handlings, fear free vet clinics. One of the many things I like about fear free, she says that the vets know the importance of referring to reward based trainers. And it means finding ways to engage people and encourage them to participate, such as by scrutinizing claims or asking questions, as well as helping people troubleshoot any issues they're having, such as helping to understand the need to use good dog training treats instead of kibble. So we're talking in terms of spreading the good news. Okay? Misinformation can be hard to counter, and it takes valuable time and resources away from spreading the messages that we do want to get across. That's why it's so important to be positive about reward-based training and good animal welfare. It's one of the reasons I like to share great posts by others in my monthly newsletter and to discuss good books in the Animal Book Club. There are many people producing great content about dogs and cats. Every time we share these articles, we're helping to contribute to a perceived social norm that the treatment of animals should be humane and in line with the principles of good animal welfare. And we're encouraging these trainers and authors to produce some much such material too. So it's a matter to every dog and every animal in our lives because it affects their welfare. Dog training should be fun and make the dogs happy. And that's what, when we're talking in terms of the difference, when I think back to my early days of dog training, marching around the room, heel, and the dogs are all marching around. And positive dog training, it's tails wagging and smiling faces on the dogs and the people watching, and just a whole different game.
No, our perceptions are different, especially when it comes to social norms, as this article started out with. I mean, there are people still who like to be dominant and feel that they have to be the alpha for their dog. There are still trainers who are training like that.
Absolutely.
And yes, and you can, because of those stupid algorithms on social media, it's easy to find yourself down the path of negativity. Not just in dog training, in several other aspects of life which we have seen. However, we need to be able to block those out, and as you said, in the nicest possible way, try to not necessarily change their minds, but help them down a better path. Let's just say that.
Yeah, that's a good way. That's a good way.
All right, we got through a lot. I learned, again, as I do every time we do a show, I learn something new. Let's see, we started off from Dr. Zazie Todd. Do people treat little dogs differently than they treat big dogs? Well, just think about it. We do. That's one of the new things I learned. Little dogs, from my mind, are often used to entertain us, where the bigger dogs we use to play with and do things for us and stuff like that. I guess that's still for us. All right, next, senior dogs and symptoms. It is very important to get your dog to the vet twice a year for a wellness checkup if they are a senior dog. They have cognitive decline. They could have hearing or sight loss, but they deserve to be free of pain, even if it means you have to give them pharmaceuticals. One of the things that Charlotte suggests always is a species-appropriate diet throughout life, especially with the additive of omega-3s. That should help in the long run when it comes to the health of your senior dog. Next, the importance of diet rotation. Whether you are feeding your dog that dry kibble junk or if you are feeding your dog species-appropriate diet, it is important to change those foods around so that there is no problems that magnify from feeding the same food over and over again, and those problems just magnify. And as Charlotte says, it's just plain logic, folks. And then again from Dr. Zazie Todd, reasons to be positive. Well, we don't need to go into it right now, but be careful about social media. Be careful about misinformation and those people who feel that domination is the key to training. Just watch them train, and like Charlotte said, watch the dog's body language when they're getting yelled at to do something. they're not having fun. Training should be fun. All right, Charlotte, before we head out, do you have any last words for us?
Yes, how that it is amazing how much love and laughter they bring into our lives, and even how much closer we become with each other because of them, said John Grogan. And it does that. It does that. When if you're smiling with your dog, chances are you might smile at the next person you pass on the street.
Living with your dog, living with your dog, living with your dog with Charlotte.
Isn't that cool?